Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our Marketing Data Integration Playbook webinar. My name is Lindsay Besson, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator at Zirous, and I'll be your moderator for today. We have a great presentation for you, but before we get started, let's meet our speakers. First, we have Brandon Schulte, the Director of Marketing Technology at Zirous. Brandon is a marketing technology expert with over 15 years of experience. He understands the challenges faced by business leaders to grow revenue while optimizing channel efficiency and employee productivity. And from Vertify, we have Rhett Hartsfield. Rhett is passionate about partnering with customers in a solutions-driven journey. By integrating clean data between apps, he enables marketing, sales, and revenue teams to collaborate and do what they do best. So before we get started, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, you can contact us at zirous.com. We'll also share Brandon and Rhett's contact information at the end. And I'll hand things over to you, Brandon.
Great, Lindsay, and thanks for everybody joining us today. We're real excited to present this content for you, and we couldn't be more excited about bringing marketing and automation and being able to connect your systems like CRM, e-commerce, or any other core applications together with marketing to really get the bang for the buck. So a little bit of background on how Zirous, Marketo, and Adobe all go together. So Adobe is known for best-in-class products, including Marketo. That's kind of the rocket ship that helps propel your marketing engine. Vertify allows you to connect your data and the customer information about where somebody is in your journey across your different platforms. So that's kind of the fuel that ultimately propels your marketing endeavors. And then lastly, Zirous is that pilot that helps make sure that your project comes in on time, comes in on budget, that everything is done correctly so you can get the true ROI out of the investment that you're making in marketing automation, as well as those investments you're making in other core tools, like I mentioned, CRM, e-commerce, etc. So a little background about each of the companies. So Zirous has been in business for almost a little over 35 years. We have 75 employees, of which 90% are consultants. We've worked in just about every area of marketing, technology, and data since our founding. We also boast our average employee tenure of 9 years, which what that means for a customer is as your MarTech stack continues to evolve, the person that helps you with the integration with Marketo or a marketing automation platform, as well as any other systems, will likely be able to come back and work with you as you continue to evolve your stack. Adobe is a best-in-class marketing automation tool, specifically Marketo, but they have lots of other products as well that will help you extend your reach with regard to marketing and customer data management. They help you orchestrate your buyer journeys by being able to reach people where they're at and be able to recognize when a customer is interested in buying products. They also help you engage across channels. So obviously email is a big piece of it, but it's engaging in those social channels, some of those paid channels, some of those organic channels, your webinar event channels to be able to understand where the customer is and where they should be able to go and what the right message is for the next step. It also helps you personalize the buyer journey. As marketers, we all understand how important it is to really make our messages relevant to that customer. Adobe really does a great job of allowing you to do that. So whether you're dynamically inserting content based on the organization or industry the customer's in, or you're changing content based on personalizing it with, like, say, their name, their company, or even just being able to understand what piece of content they're in based on where they're at in the buyer journey is hugely helpful. Last but not least, Marketo and Adobe really help you prove and improve the impact of the marketing efforts across the business. So this allows you to understand what spend is equating to revenue. It also helps you show the value of marketing to the overall organization. And because of all those things, it's not surprising to see that Adobe's rated by Gartner as the top product in the space. Vertify is a best-in-class integration as a service solution. They're based in Austin, Texas, and have hundreds of customers across North America and beyond. They work with customers to move millions of records per day and really work to get you up quickly. So Zirous does all the implementations for Vertify, so we're well versed in those systems. They are actually sold on Adobe paper. That's how much Adobe trusts them to be the great middleware partner that they are, and really help you guys be able to stand up your systems with, non-technical folks being able to run this, so your marketers can have access to that customer data without needing to know code or in-depth data movements. So as we get into kind of this marketing data playbook, we're going to kind of talk through some of the recipes for success here that we'll be discussing today. So first, we're going to talk about sales and marketing alignment. Obviously, one of the biggest sources of contention and frustration in any organization can be that sales and marketing alignment. So we're going to talk about how data and how integration helps facilitate better working relationships between marketing and sales to drive better end results for your company. Next, we'll talk about compliance. So as privacy laws have continued to move forward across the globe, making sure that you're, managing compliance, not getting your company in trouble with the legal ramifications, as well as providing for a better customer experience. We'll talk about some of those things. Next, we're going to go through that customer journey and customer experience. So kind of the hallmark of what a marketing automation platform does and how you can use data to really be able to improve your customer's experience as well as improve your bottom line. And then lastly, we'll talk through analytics and go through how you can leverage the data to be able to really understand what you're doing in what is working, what isn't, and being able to put more towards what's working and less towards what's not. We have a separate presentation with the interview between myself and Rob Alfieri, who's a senior solutions consultant architect at Adobe, that will be coming out in a separate video as well. So we'll definitely have that available to you guys if you're interested on our website and our YouTube page. And then last but not least, we're going to finish with a quick few questions. So if there's any questions you're interested in submitting, don't hesitate to send those through. Otherwise, Lindsay will ask a few questions at the end as well. So we jump into sales and marketing alignment. Like I talked about in the intro, there's a lot of disconnect between what sales feels that marketing is doing and what marketing feels sales is doing to interact on their leads. We've seen that companies, in many cases, don't even have an agreed definition upon what a lead is. So if you think of kind of that buyer journey, if somebody's going from a suspect to a prospect to maybe a marketing engaged lead to a marketing qualified lead, to a sales accepted lead, and then on through the opportunity funnel. Many companies don't have an agreed upon definition of what those are, and then what the requirements are for each side, sales and marketing, to be able to interact with those customers to provide that joint experience. We've also seen that our customers and those across the board that have a lead scoring mechanism see greater success than those companies that don't, because they've thought through, what sales really needs, and they're also being able to evaluate those lead scoring mechanisms to make sure that ultimately the types of customers that we're driving, the type of cadences they're running through, are ultimately adding value to the business. So I'm going to start talking about the right process. So when I look at the three legs of the marketing stool, there's people, process, and system. So obviously systems in this case would be your marketing automation system. The people would be your staff, and the process is kind of how everything works together. If all those three are in alignment, you generally see great results. If any of those get out of alignment, there can be some headwinds against the progress that you're trying to make from a marketing perspective. So when we look at the customer journey, there's a few things that we start with process-wise. First and foremost, we need to understand where customers are coming from. So where is that initial lead source? How did we capture that person? It could be things like they filled out a form. It could be that they attended a webinar. It could be that maybe they responded to a campaign, or it could be that our sales team had access to that person. So understanding where the person starts with their journey with is really important. Next, you need to have those stages and triggers. So what qualifies a person to move downstream? Now, in a lot of organizations, you may see every lead that comes in net new moves over to sales, which is great. I have other organizations where the leads may come over, but they don't actually get assigned until they hit a certain qualification threshold, which means they're kind of warmed up and ready for that sales engagement piece. But understanding what those stages and triggers are hugely important, not only to make sure that the initial customer movement gets the salesperson at the right time, but what happens with an existing customer who may be an existing customer or maybe an existing prospect does something else. What is that notification process like to the salesperson? And then if for some reason, like maybe as the salesperson is going through the BANT criteria, so budget, authority, need and timeline. Maybe for whatever reason that prospect isn't ready right now. How are they disqualifying that lead and putting the right code in so marketing is able to pick that right back up? Which could be that, hey, this person's never going to be a good lead. So we can focus our efforts on other people and not spend money at someone who isn't going to be a good source for us. Lastly, the transitions I think are hugely important with the process. So each team should look at that service level agreement between sales and marketing. So when a marketing qualified lead gets sent over to sales, what is the follow-up timeline? How many times is that salesperson going to follow up the lead before they disqualify it? When a lead is disqualified, what should marketing do on that end of it in terms of like re-engaging or nurturing that lead? Or conversely, if a lead qualifies and becomes an opportunity, like should there be certain things that person's taken out of so marketing isn't causing any conflicting or different messages than what sales is trying to do when somebody's in the pipeline. I think there also needs to be a huge amount of transparency between each of these stages. So the more information that marketing can pass along to sales. So for example, like if you guys are interested in the Marketo Sales Insight plugin, you're able to see different sales activities or different marketing activities that sales can do and that can see when they're calling out to a customer. And then on the marketing side, the more that can be updated about the customer and the different fields and why they're qualified or why they're not qualified, that helps marketing do better with bringing better leads in the future. And then last but not least, making sure that everything is automated as much as possible. So, it's kind of that, work smarter, not harder approach. So by doing these things, you're going to have, more engaged customers, which should convert at a higher rate and should be able to have things and different nurture streams go out to them without somebody need to intervene and say, hey, we're going to spin up an email for this, because that email or that messaging should already exist based on where they're at in the funnel. So it really helps you guys as marketers do more with the same amount of people or less, which is a huge win for everybody. So next comes data intelligence. So I mentioned this a little bit ago, but this is the example of the Marketo Sales Insight plugin that works with core CRM systems like Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics. You can also, with Vertify, use this in systems like NetSuite or a version of this in NetSuite. And then there are a few other tools that end up being like iframes that you can port that data into sales. This is hugely important for salespeople to understand what marketing is doing and how they're nurturing their customers. Plus, it gives them insight that they can see that the person has been on a certain page or filled out a certain form or read a certain email. That really helps break the ice when that salesperson makes the initial call out to that person. The other thing that you can do with this tool and with sales and marketing working together is being able to be proactive with that messaging and using that information on engagement to ultimately help drive things. So for example, if I as a salesperson know somebody's a good prospect, I can add them to campaigns in Marketo to potentially allow the customer to be reached out to in certain ways. Maybe it's adding them to a newsletter, maybe it's adding them to events, maybe it's adding them to an ABM campaign because they're at one of our top accounts that we're trying to go after. I'm also able to see the score of all the different activities and work together with the marketing team to come up with what are the activities that we want to score on, as well as the demographic behaviors. And then I can also see the analytics of how things are doing, so I can understand what's working and what's not. From a performance alignment piece, I think it's really important that all the different sources or functional units that touch teams are aligned. So that obviously is your marketing and sales team, but I do work with a lot of teams that have BDR teams as well that are doing marketing like activities to prospect within organizations. By sharing that data in CRM and pushing it back into Marketo, you're allowing your marketers to potentially be able to help the BDR team nurture folks, as well as kind of see the status to maybe take certain people out of cadences if you're using a third-party engagement tool like a SalesLoft, Exant, or some other tool. I think it's also important to be able to, publish the key performance indicators for each area. So, I think both sales and marketers should be scored around the different metrics of the funnel. So if you guys have a conversion metric, I think it's important that, marketing understands like this is how many leads we need to get in order to get the ones that convert into opportunities and the ones that ultimately end up in pipeline and revenue. I think marketing needs to be responsible for some of those sales objectives. And I think sales also needs to understand the different marketing objectives and how important it is to their piece to be able to do that. So the more you can have related success metrics or similar KPIs where at least there's some skin in the game for both sides, I think the better it's going to be. I think communication is also key. I mean, I think that's key in every aspect of life, but like any good partnerships, it's important for sales to understand what marketing is doing, what marketing understand what sales is doing, to make sure they're aligning and the messages are in line. So say you have a new product to launch. How are we going to be marketing this product? How is sales going to be following up with this product? What are the key value drivers that help differentiate us from our competition? Marketing needs to be able to help, kind of warm that ground up and kind of be the air cover to the sales, on running the ground game there. And then the last, again, another piece is the lead scoring that I'm going to talk about here in a second, but it's really important that sales feels like they have a say when it comes to lead scoring. Ultimately, they're the ones that have to follow up with the leads. So really understanding for them, what are those demographic factors and what are the engagement factors that they see. So a grade A lead, so marketing can really focus on getting more of those onto sales. From a scoring perspective, I think it's really important to not let good be the enemy of great. So just because you can score a myriad of things, don't wait to do lead scoring until you have absolutely every attribute that may be of value to score. I would say let's focus on some core things. So it could be like, people fills out, if a person fills out a lead form, they get this. If their job title is a certain value, they get this. If they have a certain size of company, maybe a certain industry is important, to really get those scoring mechanisms in there first, and then also be willing to review those scoring mechanisms and update accordingly. One of the things that I see my customers sometimes stray away from is they get so excited about engagement, which Marketo does really, really well, that sometimes they lose sight of the demographic factors. So I try to tell customers to try to balance those demographic scoring metrics with the engagement scoring metrics to make sure that you're not over accentuating one or the other. For example, if I say you get 10 points if somebody is the VP of X at whatever you're trying to sell to. So maybe it's the VP of marketing, maybe it's the VP of finance, it's the VP of sales, or whoever you guys are going after for your business. If you say that person's worth 5 points because of the score, and that's something that the salespeople really want, but then you say, I'm going to give 1 point every time somebody opens an email, is opening 5 emails the equivalent of that high value prospect based on their title? Only you can answer that for your company, but really look to balance that. And then lastly, make sure as you guys look through things that you evolve the score over time. There's ways within Marketo to really understand how often you flow something through. So maybe they get scored once, maybe they get scored every time. Maybe you want them to score for something that they do every 30 days. You can also do negative scores or set data values back to 0. So say somebody unsubscribes, rather than saying, hey, take X points away, because they may have a really high score and still may look really high depending on what you take away. You may say, hey, you have 1,000 points, rather than subtracting 50 points and still being 950, let's put you back to 0 because you've unsubscribed to our messaging. So really be flexible in terms of how you want to score that, and then evaluate to make sure that what you're doing is driving. You should be able to export everything out to your analytics platform and have people analyze, like, do better lead scores equate to more pipeline and more revenue? If it's not, then that's what gives you an opportunity to make those adjustments. With that, I'm going to move into compliance. So this is kind of one of those things that marketers sometimes don't want to listen to, but if you do compliance right, I think actually it's better for what you're going to do. And that's kind of a tough thing to say. I know the first time I started dealing with compliance, it kind of seemed like lemons, and it took me a while to kind of see like, hey, I can turn these compliance lemons into lemonade. I think the main thing that you see is, treat customers like you want to be treated yourself. So as you can see for some of these stats here, I mean, I think a lot of customers correlate trusting a brand with purchases. So if you're sending messages to people for things that they've opted out of or categories they're not interested in, that doesn't really show that level of trust. Conversely, if you understand what people are interested in and you're really very stringent in terms of who gets what and why, generally you're going to be able to nurture those people. You're going to see better engagement rates. The other piece is it's really important, especially with some of the legislations out there. So whether we're talking about GDPR or CASL or CCPA or anything else that may be coming along, it's important to know where your customer data is. And there's a lot of applications that can kind of help manage that. Zirous has a lot of that. But with regard to marketing automation, being able to understand where the customer data is, if you do get those requests to be forgotten requests, if you do business in Europe, it's extremely important to stay compliant because of those fines to be able to do that. And Marketo allows you to quickly find that person and potentially delete data if needed. So the first thing that I always tell people is to start off good. So consent is kind of your first stopgap in terms of the way to being with compliance. So this means every time that somebody comes to your site, whether they fill out a form, whether they fill out a landing page, to get that consent from them right off the bat, to have that opt-in checkbox. I would also offer flexibility. There may be certain consent that you need in the European Union that you may not need in the US. That doesn't say you shouldn't necessarily get it in the US, but understand there's flexibility there. So at the end of the day, you're still able to drive your business and not be so beholden to legislation that may not be relevant to that particular customer. Offer incentives whenever possible. So this could be like offering content. It could be offering to sign up to receive a gift card, anything like that. And then make sure you're managing that consent in real time, because most of the different privacy laws have a certain time period where you have to honor consent by. Next, give people choice. And this is something as a consumer, I think everybody understands, but when we get into a business side, I think sometimes we forget it. So send things to me that I care about, and I'm going to be more happy with you as a customer. Sometimes that means sending them less. And I know that's tough when you're working with stakeholders to say, maybe we don't want to send this, but there's downsides into sending people things that they don't want to send. You could lose them altogether. You could also, alienate them or potentially have them unsubscribe from other things from your company that maybe they do want to see. I'd also focus on how are we driving the relationship and driving a customer down the funnel instead of just sending it to as many people as possible. It's true that if you fall out a boat, you're likely going to hit water in some cases, but there's a lot of negative that you can get by oversending. So really make sure that you're only sending when it makes sense. Whatever you do, try to use things like preference centers to limit the impact of unsubscribes. And the more personalization you can do by understanding what people are interested in, generally the better conversion rates you're going to see as well as not losing customers from a kind of a defensive posture. From an offensive perspective, if you know what somebody's interested in, you're much more likely to help sell your product. Next, wherever possible, combine data sources. So this is kind of where integration comes into play. Combine data from your CRM, e-commerce systems with marketing automation. Maybe it's a data lake that you have. The more relevant data you can bring in together and standardize in a format, and using a tool like Vertify is a great way to do that, the better you're going to be long term. Also, make sure you're following the best practices from an engineering perspective of to avoid duplicates. So when is the record the same? When is it different? How do I decide when I update? What are my rules in terms of, maybe I only add it when it's empty, update when empty. Do I overwrite? Do I not overwrite? And then which system is the source of record is hugely important as well to understand that. Next, you want to make sure you centralize communication whenever possible. So obviously there's a lot of channels together. With marketing automation, you can bring those different channels together in one ecosystem, understand what that engagement is. Same thing when you're using a tool like Vertify, being able to centralize data between a customer CRM record, their marketing record, their e-commerce record, you name it. Really work to data map that back and forth to understand how fields work together. Again, where that primary source of truth is for the data, there may be certain things like accounts and opportunities that should be sales, should be your CRM system, like a Salesforce, Dynamics, NetSuite, so on and so forth. For other things, it may be marketing automation. So that may be like your address information, your phone information, your engagement information, and really make sure that those updates move regularly. So data is only as good as the accuracy of it. So where it makes sense, let's sync that data real time so you don't have disconnects between different platforms. And last but not least, it's important to really conserve those lists and really work to continually engage your database. There's stats out there that say the average marketing database can decay by 1/5 per year, which is pretty relevant because people leave jobs, they unsubscribe, they change roles, that type of thing. So being able to understand that is great. Sharing that bounce and unsubscribe date with other systems, so you're not having salespeople reach out. If a salesperson realizes that somebody left the company, updating that information in CRM so that comes back to Marketo, so you're not sending people that are not interested in your information. And then make sure you're always re-engaging those dormant customers. So sometimes we stop at acquisition and we don't always think through how can we ultimately move people through the funnel. So the more we can re-engage those customers and bring them back into the fold, the better we're going to be long term. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime, Rhett, to be able to kind of talk through customer journey management and analytics.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brandon. Again, thank you all for joining us today. So I'm going to lead us into the next topic, moving into data integration in relation to the customer, right, and their experience and their journey. And let's start off saying, customer experience, it's an idea that encompasses a lot, right, from prospect to client. They're all experiencing your company in one way or another, right? From first touch to being passed on to even down the line to customer success, right? The experience continues. This is the customer journey, right? How do we guide and usher prospects through the funnel, through deal stages, and to become customers? So we'll get into existing customers here in a moment, but let's start here at the beginning with prospects. And after getting your data foundation in place, the next ingredient is to add personalization to your marketing mix. This means customizing initial experiences for customers based on what you know about them and tailoring how they interact with your brand. And as customers, we all know what this feels like. I often eliminate targeted material on my feed or in my email that isn't relevant to me at all. So as a professional, we tap into those factors, such as buying behavior, location, familiarity with the brand, right, and even product interest. Here's an example: a user based in Northern California with a family might have ads for Disneyland pop up, but while a similar user that lives in Atlanta might get a same, but for Disney World instead of Disneyland, right? Another example might be the user's context. Perhaps the person has a family, but travels for business often, and therefore nights and weekends leisure travel is highlighted. But during the day, destinations booked for business trips can be highlighted, right? So if we are focused on the customer journey and how we can personalize those initial experiences, there is some overlap, but also some significant distinction between a BDC and B2B personalization, right? All customers, individual or business, wants to be understood. They want personalization. And that's also the case for multiple prospects or contacts within an organization, as well as for your existing customers. So how does data integration support these two areas? By allowing key customer data from the CRM, from the sales team, to get back into the marketing team's hands. For example, marketing qualifies a lead, sends it to sales, right? And since the systems are integrated, the salesperson is able to view all the marketing activity that the lead engaged with. The salesperson can personalize his discussion based on that data. So, oh, they downloaded this white paper, or they did this survey, or they viewed our pricing page 4 times, right? And they've requested a demo. So they have an initial call and a conversation, and it goes well, and they move them to the next stage or funnel and ordeal, right? But marketing can have a campaign with personalized messaging set for leads who moved into that specific phase of the funnel or deal. Or perhaps have a campaign set to, if that lead has sat in that stage for a certain amount of days, they can be in this campaign. But let's say that contact is just the end user, and they put us in touch with their director, and we add their contact information inside the CRM. So now marketing already has a campaign that's set for all prospects that include that title, that title director, right? So on and so forth. Marketing and sales can have lockstep approach into messaging and timing in order to build a consensus across departments and drive a timeline. As more contacts are added to an account on the CRM side, marketers have access to fuel their segmentation, and as that data grows, new customers cost more than existing ones, right? So we upsell, cross-sell, find ways to continue bringing value to that customer. So a new product or service rolling out, marketers should be able to have access to all existing customers at any given moment to send out emails about the new product or service. Do you have a loyalty program? Can you segment on customers that have been with you over 5 years? Are you in consulting? Perhaps a new law, code, or policy is going to affect certain customers you have in a certain region or situation. Can marketing access those records and put them into the right campaign, right? So to sum up that idea, does the marketing team have immediate, up-to-date access to the data in the CRM that could facilitate better personalization? And to that point, they say timing is everything. And there's data all over the place indicating that the longer it takes for a company to interact with prospects or customers, the chances of doing business with them start to decline rapidly. So 2 ideas to consider here: data and speed. You want to get data to sales as fast as possible, but you also want them to have beneficial, relevant data. It's a simple yet profound topic that data integration platforms are literally built for. So with integration, you can give your sales team the buyer profile sooner than later. With automation, why does automation have to stop at marketing automation? Right? Triggers and workflows can span across your tech stack. When your MQL criteria is met, let the system work for you and push it to the CRM. Why wait for a nightly batch of data or a daily handoff for teams to learn about new leads? It can be instantaneous and it can be personal. So get on the phone with them today in that hour, right? Moving on to more of their experience, right? So a lead has been passed to sales at lightning speed. Sales picks up the phone. What do they say? What are they going to talk about? Up to this point, the prospect has had personalized interactions with your company, but only in a digital experience. Right? They've seen curated content, relevant emails, ads aligned with their preferences. The personalization can't and doesn't have to stop there. Make their experience build upon itself by sharing data across departments. Let everyone who gets on the phone with a customer have a similar relevant data before they pick up the phone. Nobody likes to repeat themselves, but more than that, nobody likes to be misunderstood. Avoid this with your customers by sharing data between departments. As a lead moves in the funnel or across buying stages, each department should be able to view what they need, when they need, in order to prepare and anticipate a buyer's next steps. So last section of our presentation is about integration for analytics, right? And here's how Oracle, the tech giant, defines analytics at a basic level. Analytics is the process of discovering, interpreting, and communicating significant patterns in data. And for business specifically, they say this: business analytics focuses on using insights derived from data to make more informed decisions that will help organizations increase sales, reduce costs, and make other business improvements. So most companies realize they need to do something with all this data, as the cartoon illustrates. But unfortunately, too often they aren't sure what that something should be. And the actual data backs that up, that they don't know. Being in this industry, data and data management, one of the things I push for people to own is that the data you need to make decisions is probably under your nose. And so there's a lot that you can do with the data you already have. And just like making any decision, you have to trust something or someone giving you good reason to make that decision. And so before you go down the road of analytic platforms and algorithms, which I won't do here, that road can be choppy if you don't have access to reliable current data from the start. So that brings us to source of truth. Brandon touched on this earlier. How reliable is it? To look at your data efficiently and effectively, it starts with consolidation. There's a movement towards having a single source of truth. And for most, that's the CRM. For others, it's the database or warehouse. Whichever model a company utilizes, it has to be dependable and that it's showing you the things your business needs to know, right? And when you talk about accessing your data, you don't want to have to look into multiple platforms. Depending on your tech stack, you probably have multiple sources, but you don't want to be pulling reports from multiple sources or platforms. Break down these data silos and effectively departmental silos by integrating your tech stack. Yes, utilize integration to develop the workflows needed for prospects to become customers, but also use integration to create your source of truth. According to the CMO Council, 31% of companies express lacking the right data foundation to build a customer strategy. So if you're a CMO, VP, or director of operations needs to see what's working or not, can they look to the source of truth? Is all the customer data living in one place? If not, you're losing time and people are probably doing legwork that can be automated. So if you lean into data integration, the process can be automated. So onto this slide of making it timely, right? The previous slide, we looked at the benefit of real-time sync for the customer's experience, but also please know real-time sync means just as much, if not more, for you in your company. Things can happen in real time behind the scenes while you continue doing the work that matters. So integration happening in real time, that obviously means efficiency. Manual processes that would be slower are now automatic and faster. But what this also means is your data is more accurate. How so? Well, by eliminating manual processes or double entries, you significantly decrease the chances of errors. At the same time, old data may not be accurate. It may not reflect your real numbers because you need it real time, right? If your systems are integrated, automation makes sure that data is where it needs to be when you need it. If you have to give an update to leadership about current numbers in the afternoon, you can run a report moments before because you can still account for the data coming in that day rather than hours or even days before. Hear me, I'm not encouraging procrastination, of course, but what I am saying is you should be able to trust your systems. Technology isn't perfect, but the technology within data integration does allow for you to do the things you're needing to do right then and there. You don't have to rely on like I said, the nightly batch data or an email from the system or company that can go into this report, but have it all automatically be sent where you need it and when you need it. Lastly, integration allows for critical building blocks to do a couple of things: attribution and ROI. Most CRMs or whatever platform you use to report on closed deals has default objects and fields within it to include in your report. If your MarTech or your CRM aren't integrated, it's probably a manual process and pulling spreadsheets to match marketing data to close deals, going line by line to figure out what all your new clients and customers engage with in terms of marketing. And then to analyze, feed an attribution model, you start to aggregate that over and over, hoping to find the pattern, right? But what if you could do the report in one system? All the relevant marketing data could be attached to a contact, to an account in the CRM. So whenever you want to run reports on a recent customer's journey, you can see all of that within the CRM or source of truth. So now the CMO, marketing director, head of ops, has consolidated data that's faster and an automated way to see marketing and sales data together and visualize what activities were associated with a closed deal and then adjust course, making decisions based on real relevant revenue data, right? The loop on your ROI looks more complete. It's easier to see how that campaign, that white paper, or webinar actually turned into closed business. So to recap, data integration does a lot for your business. alignment across teams, breaking down silos. It helps achieve data compliance. It creates better customer experience, and it's the foundation for you to start using analytics. So thank you so much for your attention thus far, and I'll turn it back over to Lindsay for some additional questions.
Great, thanks, Rhett. Well, we'll dive right into it. My first one is for you, Rhett. The question is Vertify able to integrate custom objects and fields specific to business or industry?
Yes, that's a great question, and yes, we can do that. Our platform is designed to pull and push data that's exposed inside the system. So if we're talking about Marketo, maybe depending on certain packages, they have an allotment of custom objects and fields they can create that might be specific to a certain industry. We have access to all of those, and we can push those over to the CRM and vice versa. If you have the ability within your CRM, you have privileges, subscription level to create custom objects and fields inside that, we can map that over. We have the configurability set up in our tool to push and pull objects and fields wherever you need them to go.
Awesome. That's great information. Brandon, this one's for you. What are the best practices for implementing and managing lead scoring?
Yeah, that's another great question. So a couple things that I look at when doing lead scoring is, first and foremost, get both your sales and marketing leadership aligned in terms of what constitutes a good lead and why. I think that's really important to have both viewpoints at the table to make sure that the relevant scoring comes over to sales. The worst thing you happen is marketing comes up with what they think is a great scoring model, and then the lead comes over to sales and they look at it and say, this is not a good way lead any way, shape, or form. You can definitely potentially even do more harm than good because of that. So I think that's the first piece, is getting people aligned. From there, then I think the score isn't as important, raw score. So I have a lot of customers like, hey, what should the threshold be for an MQL, that type of thing. I'm not as concerned much as that as balancing the different pieces. And I did allude to this a little bit during the presentation earlier, but really mixing those demographic scoring criteria with those engagement scoring criteria. I think by default, marketers tend to think engagement helps drive value, and it does. Don't want to minimize anything from that standpoint, that obviously the more you can get somebody engaged with the brand, the better you are. But I would also really look keenly at those demographic things. So if I was a salesperson and I had an ideal customer profile, or maybe have different personas that I'm targeting for different products that I sell, like what makes up those right factors in terms of things like job title, company, maybe it's an ABM process or a top targeted account. The more I can look at those factors to align those and, kind of make sure that merges in with what my engagement criteria, the more successful my scoring model is going to be. And then lastly, just really focusing on evaluating that on a regular basis. So that isn't saying on a day-by-day basis do it, but maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's semi-annually. You take a look at your scoring model and see, is our scoring equating to better value? If it is, keep doing more of that. If it isn't, then make some adjustments that we think make sense to continue to really make sure that correlation exists between lead score and ultimately sales.
Great. Well, that wraps up our questions. Thank you, Brandon and Rhett, for great information and input as always. And to our viewers, thanks for joining us. Feel free to reach out with any questions you have about the presentation, or if you're just interested in learning more. Brandon and Rhett's information is listed here. But thank you again for tuning in to our Marketing Data Integration Playbook webinar, and we'll see you next time.